Thank you so much for coming. I have to follow my own advice. My phone is off. I hope yours is too. And we are not going to take questions during the program, but these birds have agreed to stay as long as you need after. And they've also agreed that they would talk a little longer. So we're going to let it go until maybe about 10 after 1, but don't be giving anybody the evil eye if they need to walk out to get to work. So it's going to be really casual at that point, but it's true, nobody works anymore. Oh boy, you're going to have to deal with him. Well, if you don't get enough West Side chat while you're here, I hope that you will, of course, visit the main gallery after, but also upstairs in the galleries, there are, you didn't give me the signal, Nancy, I didn't have the microphone close enough. Upstairs, there are lots of West Side photos and objects in the local history gallery and in the photography gallery. And of course, don't forget, Dr. Immel was a West Sider and his circus is up there. Carry On is the new exhibit in the Paul Brown Museum. And of course, there's lots of West Side stuff in there too. So I hope you'll go upstairs. I have an exciting announcement. History Group is also coming back, and that'll begin the first Tuesday of October. Chris is pretending he's not interested, but he's so excited. We're all excited to have you back for that. Yay. And the last thing I have to say is that these guys have said that I should make a disclaimer. So I am not, the museum is not responsible for anything they say. And that was the official disclaimer, but then a couple of them had said, oh my gosh, all those West Siders out there, maybe they know more than I do. So don't be calling them out while they're speaking, but afterwards, if you want to chew them out for something that you don't think was the way it was, to have at it. So let me do a quick introduction. You all know Rudy, he's the king of Columbia Heights stories. Yay, Rudy Turkal. We have Mel Herncane, who just has a story about everything. And he still knows your address if you were ever on his paper route. Tom Ferrero, you have all enjoyed the Venice and the fabulous food there. And then we've got Fred DeGordon, and he knows all about the West Side, and he's the one who thought this program up, so you can thank him. All righty, I'm done, and here we go.
Talk loud. Talk loud. Sammy, can you hear us out there? Sammy Doc, can you hear us? Good, then we'll talk less. So, is the statute of limitations over? One more day? Okay. How many West Siders, current West Siders, are here today? How many former West Siders are here today? How many are from neither one but are just here for the cookies? We appreciate your honesty. I guess we're just going to talk some of our experiences up here, and I think we'll just kind of go around the horn. Start with Fred, because he's the one who got us into this stuff. And Fred, take it away. And talk loud, they say.
Talk loud, right?
Talk. See if Sammy can hear you.
Hey, Sandy, can you hear me?
Apparently not.
Okay.
He's paying attention now. He hears it.
Oh, yeah? All right. I was raised, actually I was born in 1943. My father came back from the Navy in the Second World War, and we bought a house. He used to live with my brother. He was 5 years older than me, and he educated me. I learned how to drive when I was 12. I won't go with it. Anyway, my father bought a house up on 15th Street, and there's 4 of them there. He paid $3,200 for it. And we were there until I was a senior at Massillon, Washington High School. One of my favorite things was my uncle drove the West Park bus, and I could go and come anytime, anywhere I wanted. His name was Tiny.
Everybody knew Tiny.
His real name was Harold Law.
Pizza!
turn the mic up and talk right into it. My uncle's name was Harold Barr. He lived at 5th and Green. The house is still there. I know that was a big house because all the family got there every holiday and we had a big party. As I said, Uncle Harold drove the bus and I had free run to the west side of Massillon. One of my things that I really appreciated, after the Second World War, they turned the golf course into a housing allotment for people that were coming home from the war. And they hauled in these old army barracks and flopped them down and made 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom homes out of them and flopped them there, and it was called Lawndale. It was very popular, and a lot of these kids went to school with us at Harvey. And I was very impressed to meet a lot of them. And another thing, one of the things they did when they came back from the war, they made more babies. Lots of them. One of the things that stand out to me at the time was we would all gather around, and they had a big tent they set up on the east side of Lawndale, and this big tent was a revival tent, and that was the beginning of the Massillon Baptist Temple. And we went down there and watched and enjoyed it all. That was one of the major. Between Harvey, Lauren Andrews, and Washington High School, which are all gone now, we all went through, and all of us up here did the same thing through the same schools. That's what I want to express on Lawndale. A lot of good people up there. When it's my turn again, I'll talk about the 6 gas stations within a 5-block or 2-block area of Faith Lutheran Church. 6 gas stations within a 2-block area of Faith Lutheran Church. Ken and Helen Williams took me to Faith Lutheran Church when I was 5 years old in 1948, and I've been there ever since. It's right behind the viaduct, which at one time was a city service gas station. So, next.
Okay. Thank you, Fred. Thank you so much. I was born 1945 on Duncan Avenue. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that's where the Venice restaurant is located. The Boys and Girls Club is now located there. The old golf links, Honey Grill, the old Italian Club was there at one time, Herm's Club, Liberty IGA, McKinley Bakery, Bosco's Lounge, which was Lou Popovich's family. And then in that area, some of the neighbors were Sarah Sheen's, Ross's, Darnell's, Shegogs, Marcerics, Burkich, DeGordon's. I lived there until I guess 6 or 7 years old. I'm not exactly sure about that. Coincidentally, I was born the day after Hiroshima, the bomb, and which effectively ended the war, and understood there was quite a celebration going on. And they tell me it was because I was born, but I think more because the war was virtually over. After that, the family moved to 8th and Main. Across Main Street was Dr. Show. Across 8th Street was Dr. Emil, and across Main Street was Dr. Show. We lived in Finney Frocks was there, Dairy Queen, Bordner's on Lincoln Way, Safeway, Dorflingers. Some of the neighbors that we had were the Luckners, Stores, Meeks, Joneses, Bartons, and we lived there for until I guess I went to school. Lastly, when I got back from school in the Army, I lived from 1972 to 1987 in Lawndale. So I am a West Sider for the most part, and spent a better part of my life there. I am going to talk a little bit about the Boys and Girls Club / the Bottoms when he gets back to me, as well as the Venice Spaghetti House. So we'll let Mel and Rudy go from here.
What makes you think it's going to get back to you?
That's what I was told. That's what everybody's here for, to hear me.
You guys are going to miss me when I'm gone. I have some great recollections about growing up on the West Side. Trying to explain to people what the West Side was like is like trying to explain low back pain to somebody. Because you can't explain low back pain to somebody unless they've had it. And you can't explain to people what it was like growing up on the West Side unless you experienced it. one of the great experiences I had in my life was delivering newspapers. I started my first paper route when I was 11, and I got out of the newspaper business when I was 16. I delivered from 17th Street Southwest down to 12th Street, and then from Main Street by Harvey School up to Overlook. I think some of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life, I met on my paper route. And I liked every single one of them except for two. No, they're not here. I also have these fond recollections about Harvey Elementary School. That was a very special place. All of the teachers, except for Mrs. Potter and Miss Quinn, looked like your grandma. But they were so kind to us, and I think anybody that went to Harvey School got a good academic start, and not just academics, but socially and every other way you could mention. And we always got excited about the penny social, which was held, I think, in February and March, and those suckers that they had. And you know, all you had to do was have one of those suckers, and you'd go into a diabetic coma. And Lord Andrews was a very special experience for me. If I go over the time, just skip me the next time around. But I have to tell you, when I started the 8th grade in 1958, I was about as sad a soul as you could imagine. You know, I had these big ears, these big glasses, and I had no clue about what life was going to be like for me. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there. And louder?
I'm getting a signal from out there.
Well, okay.
Ask Sammy if he can
But
hear you.
Sammy! Okay. So I walked into, and I was also so skinny that if I stood sideways, I disappeared. But I walked into room 304, beginning of the 8th grade, and I walked into Mr. Clarence Young's 8th grade U.S. history class, and that changed my life. Because he taught me to really like the subject matter of history. And he made me think that doing what he did would be something that could be really important. And I went home one night and I announced to my mom and dad at the dinner table that I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be just like Mr. Young. And I thought their heads were going to explode, because for my mom, who was an 8th grade dropout, that meant that her little boy was going to go to college and was going to get a job where he could wear a white shirt and a necktie every day. And Mr. Young may have had more of an influence on me than anybody in my whole life, because I spent 28 of the happiest years of my life teaching American history and U.S. government. So every time I drive past that vacant lot, I get this fuzzy feeling, because I can still see the building and I can still see room 304. And the other thing that we're going to talk about is, to me, the heart of the West Side was the Watts Confectionery. That was our hangout. Bob and Cliff had more adopted kids than any parent in the history of Massillon. Those guys were so good to us. And, you know, I got to travel all over the world and in probably 30-some states looking for the best hamburger in the world, and it was right down the street from my house.
By the way, over here on the table, there's a yardstick from Watsie's and a merchant token, too. This information over here is generally West Side. The middle of the table, where the things are, that's all Columbia Heights stuff, if you're interested in that. West Side, what differentiates the West Side from the East Side? I think I narrowed it down to 3 things: industry, gardens, and chicken coops. The reason I say that, the preponderance of industry was on the West Side, I think. Industry needs labor. At the time, industry needed physical labor. So a lot of that labor came from people that lived in the area. from immigrants that moved over from the European countries, like my family did, black families up from the south, and they all worked at the steel mills. They were close, and they worked within walking distance of them because not everybody had a car. Not everybody, or a lot of people took the bus. They rode with Tiny on the bus. And there's a thing over there called the Agathon News, and it's kind of interesting. There's a little article in there that talks about the Americanization classes that Central Steel was offering to their employees, which was kind of different. Gardens, a lot of people grew their gardens for a couple reasons. Number one, they liked to grow the gardens, and number two, it didn't have a lot of money. So a lot of gardens on the west side. We had fruit trees. We had plum trees, apple trees, mulberry, and quince trees. Now, if you don't know what a quince is, our quince trees used to hang over the front sidewalk. I'd be sitting on the porch and watch people go by, reach up, they would grab a quince and eat it thinking it was an apple. And then about 50 feet, they start going. Luckily, they spit it out in front of the neighbor's house. We would get our seeds at the Ceres feed supply. Walk down, just like over there, you see flour sacks over there. Chicken coops. You had eggs for breakfast, and you had chicken dinner every Sunday. Of course, we used to kill our own, too. So that's generally what I have. I'll go neighborhoods if I get another turn. Go ahead, Fred.
Neighborhoods, let me see, what's on my list? Okino Park, ever been to Okino Park? Not very many of you. And that's better. I used to hang out there with my friends, Skelly's and Alcorns and all them people there. Jerry Hollingworth even let him once or twice. But that was our main hangout. There was a little dairy delicatessen across the street we patronized. And Tom and I were talking about taking them railroad dynamite things and setting them down at the bottom underneath the bathrooms and waiting on somebody to go in the bathroom and dropping a brick on them.
Hey, Fred, the judge is out there in the audience.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. It was Tom's idea.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing, so yeah.
Yeah, you did the same thing. That was our big hangout, and we could get together, ride our bikes around everything. As I was talking earlier, I was so amazed at the day. We could leave that house at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, and if you didn't make it back by the time the street lights went on, you got a whipping. And nobody asked where you were, who you were, whatever. My father worked midnights, and my two sisters were freshly born. They're 2 years apart, and I wasn't allowed to make any noise in the house. I'd wrap up a couple pieces of cloth and throw them in a bag and go down and jump on the bus and go to Aunt Mary's house. And spend the day there playing with the Logan boys, and just a lot of good things. I still to this day could not believe how lenient our parents were because they knew the safety of everybody around. And everybody was watching for them. Drink out of a hose, we lived out of a hose. Whatever else we had. My parents were not educated, and my dad worked at the steel mill. In fact, during the Second World War, right after I was born, my mother went to Tyson and she was making shells for the war. So it was a busy, busy place. To this day, I go down 5th Street and I don't know how we park cars on both sides of the street. There's no room to walk between them. But anyway, I love the West Side. That's where I grew up. As Rudy was talking about the schools from Mrs. Spangler. In fact, Mrs. Rokeman told me when I went to 4th grade that I was lucky because she taught my father. Tommy?
You made it to 4th grade.
Hey, Rudy, I graduated. I didn't stay in grade school. And don't say anything, Mel.
Okay, how about, does everybody remember where the old boys club used to be down at the bottoms down? There's a lot of good times down there. I'm gonna talk about that just for a few moments if I could. Down at the bottoms, Lauren Andrews would have their athletic programs down there. They would practice down there. There was a lot of Class A baseball played down there through the years. Fumble ball leagues on Sundays. At the Boys and Girls Club, or the Boys Club back then, I remember Mr. Potts had a brilliant idea one winter. He was going to flood the tennis courts down there so that we could all learn how to ice skate. Well, that thing was working out pretty good, except the hose going from the boys club out there broke and all the water went down. But I think we eventually got that going, and not too many of us learned how to ice skate though, but we tried that. And there was outdoor movies down there at the boys club on Friday nights. I don't know if anybody remembers that. You would put up a big sheet and we'd watch movies. Remember that? And just about any day you would go down the bottom, there would be a bunch of kids down there playing ball, just make up sandlot games on their own. And I always would kid Mel that he would always get invited when we only had 3, 5, or 7 players. Then we would give Mel a call and he would come and join us. Up above Cherry Springs, we would go swimming up there. I don't know if any of you had a chance to do that. That was always kind of fun. Massillon Rubber Company was down in that area. El Secrets, I just barely remember El Secrets because in a young, but then Henry Potts took over as head of the boys club down there. And in the old days, we used to have boxing. Nick, you probably remember that. They can't do it. You wouldn't be able to do that nowadays. We'd shoot a bow and arrow inside there, but probably not that. And BB gun, probably not. And then also, every once in a while, we'd be able to shoot a .22. Now they would watch us and take care of things, but still, I don't think that would be unheard of today.
They watch you very closely.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, they wouldn't even let me participate in some of them. But yeah, a lot of good times down there. I want to spend a few minutes probably to talk about my favorite subject, food. The Venice Spaghetti House. Yeah. And that's the actual name. Everybody called Venice Restaurant the Venice, but it's the actual name is the Venice Spaghetti House. And my mom and dad started that around 1935 or thereabouts, and had it for the first time probably through the mid-50s. I really don't know for sure, but I know they took it back over again in 1962 or 63. Now, many of you older people out there might know better than me, but these are some of the stories that I recollect. My mom, when they first opened the Venice, all the booths had curtains, so when the people would come in, they could close the curtains and had a little bit of privacy. And my mom would always say, well, they did that because a lot of people back then didn't know how to eat spaghetti and they didn't want to get sauce all over them. And my dad would just roll his eyes. So I guess the people wanted privacy, but the Venice would have a tremendous backing from all the mills in the area. And just about every day, people from Republic Still Castings, Tyson's, Eaton, Echo, McLean's, they would come in there at some time during the day, afternoon or early evening. And that's where I first learned that there was such a thing as a 3-martini lunch. We didn't have the menus, we do have them, but I wasn't able to get them today. But the menu was really something back in those days. They would have 3 different sizes of T-bone steaks, 3 sizes of a sirloin, 2 sizes for strip, 2 fillets, and of course all the spaghetti with different varieties that they would have. A lot of good times at the Venice, and I remember one of the first, businesses that had a air conditioner in town, and I remember them bringing this thing in, and it was as big as a truck. And it was in that dining room, and it was cool in there, but we were one of the first places that air conditioning. And my dad would feed the athletic teams quite often. The Tigers would be in there, football team quite a bit, as well as other athletic teams. And it wouldn't be unusual to have someone from the Browns come down there for dinner, and probably through Tommy James, I would assume, and even some Indians players. But we had a lot of professional athletes who would stop down there from time to time. But it was quite a establishment, and very proud of what my parents were able to do with that. So, Mal, go ahead. Well, you probably remember the Venice.
Well, I think one of the things that was really neat about the Venice is you could go down there for dinner, and you could look at the table over here, and there was the richest guy in town having dinner, And then you look over at the next table, and there was a guy that looked like all he had was the clothes on his back. I mean, it was a cultural experience to go there. But I think the thing about the West Side that I think set it apart from a lot of other places was the way all the people treated each other. It was, when I was growing up on Walnut Road, everybody knew everybody else. And everybody kept their eye out for everybody else's kids. Now that was good and it was bad. It was good because if you ever needed help, there was always a front door you could knock on and somebody would take you in. It was bad because if you kind of did some things you shouldn't have done, your mom had the phone call before you got home. And one of the really crucial experiences of my young life, and I have to be very careful how I tell this, happened in 3rd grade during Miss Quinn's reading class when the guy behind me had a health emergency and they made me go home. And they cleaned my shirt up and put it in a brown paper bag and told me to walk home. So I walked across Main Street, up 14th to Tremont, down to 15th, up to Earl's house, and down the alley to home. By the time I got home, my mom had gotten phone calls from Dorothy Kaiserman, Hilda Simon, and Gladys Earle telling her that I was out wandering the streets on this hot day instead of being in school, and I was carrying a brown paper bag and I didn't have a shirt on. It was because that guy behind me threw up. But I mean, that's the way it was. And you went to Watts's, and I felt sorry for Bob and Cliff because if my mom didn't know where I was, she called 832-1287, and Bob or Cliff answered the phone, and she's looking for me. Well, the answer was, well, he's not here yet, but we expect him momentarily. Or, yeah, he's here, we'll put him right on. Or, yeah, he was here, but he and Jim Maurer left to go down to his house, and I'm sure he'll be home later. I mean, that's going above and beyond as a business owner. But to me, it was the people and the friendships. I'm not sure that Tom remembers this, but the first time he and I ever met was around 1955, going to the boys' club, and we were introduced by
Pete Spooler.
by cousin Pete Spooler, and here we are a lot of years later. What is it, 60, let's see, if we're 77 and we were 10, good Lord, that's a long time ago.
I ain't as old as you guys. I hated the old boys club.
Oh, no.
Larry Fry beat the crap out of me in the boxing ring. They used to, you could box them, like he said too, but the archery range was right next to the boxing ring, and there were no sides to the archery range. So what you did have were arrows in the ceiling, in the walls. Let me tell you about my neighborhood a little bit. I'm one of the Columbia Heights guys. Columbia Heights, if you're not familiar, was south of the Boys and Girls Club that you're talking about right now. I grew up on a street called 4th Street Southwest. And there's a map over here you're welcome to look at too. It's a historical map of Massillon that somebody made years ago. There you go. And it shows the different neighborhoods. Like one of the West Side neighborhoods was called McCullough Heights. Anybody ever hear of that? Slussertown was another section on the west side. Westorado was another segment of the west side. I didn't know that. I couldn't get off the Heights. If you're sitting on my front porch in Columbia Heights looking right across the street, you would see the Ahmeds. You would see Albert and Johnny Ahmed. There was an old guy who used to hang around. They were Arabs. We used to call them Arabians at that time. But there was an old guy who used to hang around there named Uncle Haji. Uncle Haji used to call me a little Yehudi. And I didn't know what that meant until later. Someone told me that means you little crook. Because I was the mailman. Now, Ahmed's backyard was the Venice. So, Now, right next to Ahmed's was the Negliches. They were Romanians. Her name was Buna, we called her. Next to them was the Stepetiches, were also Croatians like us. Now, both of those families had cherry trees, red cherries, yellow cherries, of which we would liberate the cherries from the trees before the birds got to them. To my left, if you're sitting on my front porch, we had two types of Garcias. We had Puerto Rican Garcias and we had Mexican Garcias. It was an up and down duplex. If you're sitting on my front porch, look to the right, you would see the Slovak families, the Raneloviches and the Kovies. Later, Junior White, Curtis White, who was a black family. One of the things that we did over there, my mom did, they would go over to Raneloviches and they had a loom and they would make rugs out of our old shirts. So whenever I outgrew a shirt, it went over next door and became part of a rug, which were sent in flour sacks like that Series Supply bag over there, sewn up with lots of other goodies called, we made them a care package, sent to relatives in the old country. So that's kind of what we did. Now, if we had to go on my back porch and look that way, I would see the Philpotts, the Relfords, the Benjamins. They were all black families. In fact, Freddie Philpott and I used to get out and hang around on the tracks. And we were playing on the trestle down there next to the field I set on fire when I was a kid. And outran Prescott Johnson. Eddie, is the law, I'm still safe here, aren't I? All right. I outran Prescott Johnson into Oakville Park. I lost him. But anyway, Freddie and I were playing down on the trestle, and a train started to come around the corner at Oakville Park. And back in those days, there were still the steam trains. So Freddie and I said, hey, we're going to get a closer look at this thing. So we climbed down in the structure of the bridge, of the viaduct, and the train was coming. And for some reason, we decided to put our coats over our heads. So anyway, we're sitting there looking right down at the tracks, and this train's coming. And all of a sudden, we're surrounded with smoke, soot, ash, hot stuff. We're coughing and we're gagging. Train goes by. I look at him, and I was blacker than he was. So then he took us up to his house, and I think Aunt Maddie wiped us off and everything. Tadich's, if on my back porch, I would look over at Tadich's, and we saw our first color TV was in that house. Well, it wasn't a color, it was an old TV with a round screen. You bought a plastic sheet to put over it. So the top of this plastic was blue, the middle was red, and the bottom was green. So it didn't matter what you were looking at, it was red, green, and blue. I'll come back with more if we have time. Fred, you got it. You got something else?
Yeah, how many steps were behind Dick's Flower Shop going down to the bottom? Oh, he knows. About 150 of them. Sandstone steps cut in the bank. I played football for Lauren Enders, and we got dressed at the school, walked all the way across 8th Street, across Lincoln Way, down by Dick's Flower Shop, all the way down the hill, and played football for 2 hours, and then started back home. By the time we hit Lincoln Way, there weren't many of us walking anymore. That was a long, long haul. I think those steps are still there. They were all sandstone. They were like 2 foot long, 8 by 8. Very nice steps. They were all cut in the bank, and that was another. How about the people that didn't have homes at one time? Do you ever remember where they were? The homeless people, where they were on the other side of the railroad tracks in the bottom across from the Boys Club, back behind Echo, or not Echo, Eden. And one year the city came in and tore them all down. I don't know what the people did. There must have been 15 or 20 of them old shacks back behind there. And I think they moved out farther out west of Dalton. So. Tom, you got another thing?
Oh, I got a little story here. When working at the Venice one day, I think I might have even been in college and was home for the summer. My dad would cash checks, and Thursday would be payday for a lot of the mills. And the place would be packed in the morning. I mean, every seat was taken in the bar, and people standing in there, of course, cashing their checks, and they'd have a couple drinks, and most of them would head home. But anyway, I would go in like 6 o'clock in the morning and get it all set up, and there'd be money there to cash these checks, and he would come in about 8:39, and this one particular day, and he comes in, how's the money going? I said, well, we're just about out of cash. I cashed all that checks here, and he goes, okay. He said, I'm going to go down to the bank, and I'm going to go get some more money. And I said, okay. And he said, now listen, well, I'm going. And he said, you're going to have to take care of that sauce in the kitchen in the back. And I mean, two great big things he had going there, like two 20-gallon pots there. I said, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'll take care of that sauce. So, of course, we get busy there, and I am really busy cashing checks and serving drinks and doing all this type of stuff, and lo and behold, I forget to stir the sauce. So here comes the girl lady, Osie, worked in the kitchen with my dad. She comes in, Tom, get back here, get back here. I goes, what? She goes, this sauce is burning, we're in trouble. So the only thing you can do is you gotta pour it out right away in something else, and whatever is burning on the bottom, you just lose it. So just as we're emptying it into another pot, here comes my dad walking in the back door. He goes crazy. Now you gotta understand this bar is packed, so I go running out in the bar room and I go take a left into the dining room. He comes chasing after me, and now the story is that he threw a knife and it stuck in a boot. Now I was already way into the dining room when he did it, but it didn't really stick. It just hit the booth and fell down. But he was upset. But all the guys that were in there, I have to hear it. I heard that story for about 10 years from all of them. I'm gonna try to stay. Now,
But the bars on the west side were really swinging places, especially when it was Republic Payday, which was every other Thursday. And after I got out of the newspaper business, I went into the banking business. I worked at the State Bank across the street in the summers. And several of the bar owners on the west side used to come in and borrow money to take back and cash checks, because guys would cash their paychecks there. And Mike Hoffaker, who had the West End Tavern for many years, would always come in on like Wednesday, and he would get $4,000. And one of my jobs was to count out $4,000, and it had to be right to the penny. Mike came in, got it. He would go back, and when he came in to pay it, the loan back, it was $4,008. But frequently, he'd come rushing in like Thursday afternoon, and he'd need more money. And so we'd say, well, how much do you need? Well, I need another $3,000. And I'm thinking, the guy took $4,000 yesterday. He's getting $3,000 now, and it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, if you went past these places in the morning on the way to school, the parking lots were filled and the bar was filled with guys drinking after they got off the midnight shift. And we haven't said anything about the Little League fields.
oh, that's right.
I mean, that was a great place for the West Side community to connect with the 3 ball fields on Oberlin Road, and then they made the new one that had the grass infield in the back, and we thought we were in hog heaven getting to play on a field that actually had a grass infield. And I played for it was the McLean Grocery Company, but it was called the IGA team. And our manager was Don Whitman, and our coaches were Dr. Jim Snively and a charming old railroader named Ernie Royer, who lived out on 27th Street Northwest. And Jim Snively once told me, Ernie Royer thought you were the toughest player he ever had. And I said, why is that? He said, well, you were playing first base, and a guy, I think it was Jim Eamer, hit one of these bouncing balls, and instead of going up and catching it, I short hopped it, and I took it in the face, knocked my glasses off, bloodied my nose, and I got to first base. Well, Jim was pretty slow to begin with, but I got to first base and got him out, and I didn't start crying until after I got him out. And Ernie thought that was really something.
Hey, Mel, talking about that Little League field, just last night, my wife and I, we were at a game for 3 grandchildren were playing, and they're in a traveling league. And I said, well, how many teams they're playing a Perry team? There was only 2 teams from Massillon in this particular league, and I think it's the 11 and 12-year-olds, used to be our Little League,
Yeah.
not Federal League, and they had 2 teams, and I remember when we played, they had 4 teams in the National League and 4 teams in the American League and for Federal League and Little League, and they were all Massillon kids, and so that Little League fields, we got to use them quite a bit, that's for sure.
And you know what's wrong today?
What's wrong today?
I'll tell you exactly what's wrong today. In the summer times on the west side, if you went to Harvey School or Emerson School or Oak Knoll Park or anything, the place was crawling with kids. Everybody's playing softball, they're playing on the jungle gyms and the swings and stuff, and now you go by some of these places at night, all you see is a drug deal going on. And, well, that might be a little harsh, but I don't see Judge Elam back there disagreeing. But there was this alley that ran right from behind our house up to Earl's on 15th Street, and there were 2 or 3 of us that always went up and down there. And my mom once asked me, now this is a confession, my mom once said, why do you guys spend so much time going up and down the alley? And we said, well, it's a shortcut. But actually, we were just going up and down the alley to see if we could get a glimpse of the McLeister twins.
You were young, you weren't stupid. I hated Little League. I wasn't good enough. I had to play in the Federal League, which was like the minor leagues for the Little League. But you getting hit in the head with a ball, that explains a lot. Footpaths. The west side was, in my experience, footpaths told you where you were going. You walked everywhere. Oak Knoll Park, at the end of 4th Street Southwest, you had to make a decision. You had 3 paths that you could walk. This was before the Boys and Girls Club were there. One path went straight across, and there were 2 ball fields there, one at each end. But this first path went straight across, and then that you could walk over to Oak Knoll Park, to the summer playground, or you could stay there late and play poker underneath the streetlights on the tables and carve your initials in the tables. If you would go to the right, coming out of 4th Street, you would walk across something called the Camel Humps, which is where the city garage is now. You walk down there to go to school, Washington High School. We walked across there to go to St. Joseph's, at which we would go to confession to confess about carving our initials in the poker table. If you walked to the end of 4th Street and took the path that went to the left, we walked to Emerson School. Then you also walked on further to Lorne Andrews if you went to Lorne Andrews. But I had to go to Jones School. I went to Lorne Andrews one day and they said, son, you're in the wrong school. Ask Mel afterwards why I had to go to Jones School.
You lived on the other side of the track.
Pretty much. You could take a hard left by the ball fields and walk out and go swimming at Brookfield Lake, which is what we used to do. It was a long walk, but it was fun to do. If you were tired, you could just go to 27th Street and swim in the creek that came out of Brookfield Lake. If you walked across the farmer's pasture there and avoided the cow patties, you could swim in the wide part of the creek, which was kind of fun too. But you didn't want to swim in the creek as we did, the creek off of 9th Street Southwest that ultimately went underneath the Republic Steel plant, which we swam in that one too. Tracks going the other way on 4th Street, if you had tracks going to the east, you would go to the mills to work. John George's convenience store, he had there in the corner of 6 by Oak Knoll Park. He would walk past our house every day to go to work at the mills. If you went, then I had to go walk across the Oberlin Road Viaduct to go to Jones. That was an experience. Another path, we would go down, we would walk on the tracks, Freddie Philpott and I and others, with our BB guns, which we could do at the time. We would walk down the street with our guns and no one would say anything. We go down to the, Eddie, are we still allowed to say that? Okay. We would shoot bottles and everything into the river, yes. Then we would hike down to Warmington Road. And it was interesting because as we were walking on the tracks, you're walking past the steel mills, and you see all the guys working, and you see the smoke coming out of the place, and you see the flames and the fire, and you see the trains working back and forth and everything. We would walk down to Warmington Road, and then turn left, and then walk backwards towards town, because there was a pine forest down there, and that was our experience of camping. We also learned something else. You build a fire in the woods, which we did, we put it out and all that stuff, but if you cook a can of beans over a fire, you should open the can first. Now, I'm not saying we were the smartest kids in the world, but we did graduate from high school. And let's see, yeah, not good enough for Little League. Oh, I used to give the bear a bath at Oakville Park. I used to work for the park department, and I used to have to go give that bear a bath. I would stay outside the cage, and I would let the hose do the work. Let's see, what else are we doing? I guess, Fred, back to you while I try to think of something else to say.
Well, you think of something else to say. They were talking about paychecks. In the west side, if you think about all the places, IGA had to make a ton of money because every corner had a grocery store on it. From Borders to, you name it, Safeway. One of the things I noticed as my growing up, I worked at Herman Ray's too. Everybody had a charge account at these stores. Everybody had a charge account, and whether it's Borders or whatever it was, and on payday, most of the families would come in and settle up. It's just amazing. Also, you could buy 3.2 gallons of Amoco High Test for $1. 3.2. Yeah. Just a great time growing up. The bear, won't ask him what happened to the bear or the elk.
I didn't kill it, I just gave it back.
First time it had one in a long time too. So, the credit thing was totally amazing to me because, as I said, I worked at Herman Ray's in the charge of cards and stuff. Eddie, you're not listening to this. When we were kids, we used to gather up pop bottles, and we'd get 25 cents. We'd go to the Venice, throw that quarter on the bar, and they would give us a beer. You talk about big time 12-year-olds, we were. And here's the owner of the bar.
It was probably 3-2 beer. You know, Mel mentioned something earlier about the neighbors and growing up in the west side, and I'm sure it was probably like that in just about every neighborhood, but growing up like that, you reminisce a little bit. And I remember my mom, we would, every once in a while, she said, "Oh, go next door to Mrs. Jones' house and tell me you need a little bit of sugar." And I'd go over there and get a little cup of sugar.
Get a little sugar?
Sugar, yeah, because she ran out of sugar or whatever. But I you know, stuff like that just doesn't happen nowadays, and somebody would come over and borrow this and borrow that and in return. But just not like that anymore. But there's a lot of good friends that I've had through grade school and high school from the west side that I'm still friends with, and as I'm sure with all neighborhoods. It was a great place. We were so close knit, and everything was together, jammed in there. Neighborhoods were, you know, you didn't have an acre of land or half acre of land, so it was good. But one thing I want, maybe Rudy could comment on, how many bars and restaurants do you think were located on Duncan and 6th Street? Oh my God, I guess every other building was a bar or a restaurant. Mel?
Well, on the subject of grocery stores, around the corner from where we lived on Tremont was this little grocery store, and it was called Swingle's. And it was owned by a guy named Ron Swingle and his wife, Opal, who had 2 sisters whose names were Garnet and Emerald. And one of the sisters was married to the guy that lived in the house between Watts's and the old gas station. And they had the credit system there. And you went in and you got something that was $1.50, and Mrs. Swingle pulled out this big manila envelope, and she had everybody's last name written down in pencil and then how much the things were. And I thought, I was just a kid, but I thought to myself, if she loses that manila envelope, she's out of business. And of course, she died, and then, because she was actually the person that really ran the operation, and she died, and Mr. Swingle he just couldn't run it anymore, so they closed it up, and they tore the place down. And if you're ever driving west on Tremont, and you go past 17th Street, and you go past the store that's on the corner there, and then right next to that's the house where the Swingles lived, and then next to that is the tiniest little vacant lot you will ever see. That's where the store was. And you know, you think back and you think there's no way that there was a building on that little pie-shaped piece of ground, but we went in there and charged it when my dad got paid. You went down and paid it. And I mean, that doesn't happen today. You know, you go out to Jackson and you go out to Myers, or you go to any one of these big giant Eagles and stuff. It wasn't like that on the west side. And we probably think it's a lot different now because we're old.
You know who else used to frequent the bars on the west side?
No.
The Salvation Army band. Salvation Army used to come play in our neighborhood. I used to think it was a free concert from the city. But then the girls would go into the bars with their tambourines to try to raise some money and everything. But they'd usually ride on Tiny's bus and come down in our neighborhood. A couple quick things. Lawndale Golf Course. There was he talked about the Lawndale housing. There was a Lawndale Country Club down there too, which faced 9th Street and Oberlin behind the Baptist Temple. If Ed Hyman was here, he could tell you, if he sits out his backyard and looks, the lay of the land was the old golf course. But anyway, the clubhouse is still there. It's on Long Avenue. It used to be a little square Spanish stucco. Yeah, it's been paneled over and everything now. But that used to be the clubhouse for the old Lawndale golf course. Salvation of the Band, Lawndale. Anybody ever play bottle cap baseball? Bottle cap baseball. We used to go down to Mike John's Confectionery, Nick Orphan's grocery store, all these places, and get the bottle caps from the pop bottles, because at that time they were glass bottles. You went over and you popped the top off with little metal things, and you drank your pop. We would go down there and get their hundreds of bottle caps, go to our backyard, break the end off of a broomstick so you just had the stick, and you played bottle cap baseball. You threw the bottle cap, you can make it dance, bob, and weave, and you try to hit that with a broomstick. So you can see why it's such a good batter in the Silver League here, Tusky. But anyway, in our backyard, it was a low level, then we had a porch up here, then a roof on the porch. So if you hit the ball on the ground, it was a single, the bottle cap. If you hit it on this side of the porch, left of the post, it was a double. This side over here was a triple. If you put it up on the roof, it was a home run. My old house is still standing there. If you go up there now with a metal detector, you could probably find hundreds of bottle caps just floating around. Oakville Park was talked about a lot, and one of the things they did in the summer playground program down there was they played tennis. Do you remember what the tennis rackets were like? Anybody? Old wood, just wooden paddles. You get down there and you play tennis with wooden paddles. That was kind of hard to do. Let's see, what else did I talk about? Oh, we were walking, earlier I was talking about shooting our guns in the river. Eddie, can I still tell these stories? All right. We also played with bows and arrows that we probably stole from the Boys Club. So we're down walking on the levee between Walnut Road and North before 21 was built through there. So we're walking on the levee, two of us, forget who I was with our bows and arrows. We're going to get on and shoot something. We didn't know what we were doing. But anyway, these two guys came the other direction on the levee. And they were kind of bobbing and weaving. So they had evidently been slightly inebriated. So they come over and they grab our bows and arrows and push us out of the way. And then they go, take our bows and arrows, and they stand back to back. And they count off 10 paces. and they turn and they shoot at each other. So the one guy shoots the other guy in the foot. Luckily, they were target arrows. They weren't hunting arrows, so it just kind of hurt his feelings. Then they just leave their bow and arrows there, drop them on the ground, and went off laughing into the night. So these were just kind of typical of some of the stories that we ended up with in the West Side. So I could feel you hovering on my shoulder.
Hovering. Mel said that you would each like, I hope this is true, you would each like to do like a 30-second wrap up, and then I'll take the microphone back when we're done. You want to start it off?
I gotta think a little
I
bit.
got my own mic, stay over there. It was such a great time being part of that. I can't express. One of the things we used to do, since the lawyers are here and the judges and so forth, alongside Tremont Viaduct, Jim Skelly and I used to trap muskrat on the river and fell in it many times. But on the east side of the river, there's a hole in the wall there where there's something. And we would take our flashlights and get all ready, and we could go underground all the way to Sickle Park, up the river. You're not hearing this, Judge. And you had to watch and make sure there wasn't a storm prior to, because it got pretty deep. We were so friendly. I don't know that we ever had a fight with anybody. Oh, we had disagreements, and the next day we were best friends. But we all got along with everybody, whether it was in school or whatever. I just enjoyed everything about the West Side. The friendliness. If you were hungry, you could walk by somebody's house and they'd throw a sandwich at you. Pick up their hose and get a drink, and they didn't care. And the chicken coops, I remember on Byron Street, we used to play in the chicken coops. And there was plenty of females around during them years too.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for showing up today. I'm very impressed with the crowd. This is unbelievable. Maybe just a little bit of a disclaimer. Some of the things I brought up is from the best of my memory. I may be off a little bit here and there, but it was a long time ago. And again, just to reiterate a couple of things I said before, that really some good friends that I made early on in life in the West Side are still with me here, still good friends, and good place to grow up. And I'm sure wherever anybody else grew up to, I'm sure it was a good place too. But it's always fun to get here and get in a venue like this and reminisce a little bit of, bring up some names, some establishments, and jog a few memories. It's always good. So if anybody wants to talk a little bit later on, just let us know, and maybe you can help us out, or maybe you can correct us a little bit too.
You know, Mark Ross was my barber.
Yes, he was mine too. I had hair back then. But to me, it was the people. You know, I sit here and I think back to people that I met when I was on the West Side: Jerry Adams, Bob Marks, Howard Caney, 9th Street Southwest, Bob Watts, Cliff Watts, Mr. Young, who had an incredible influence on me. And I guess I would just close by saying that all the things that we've talked about today are a good bit of the reasons why I think I'm probably the luckiest kid that ever got to grow up any place. I wouldn't have traded that time for anything. It was absolutely wonderful, and I think we need to thank you folks, because you came here today to give us a chance to talk about times in our lives when we were younger, and things that we had the good fortune to grow up with. So we want to thank you, and I want to say thanks to all the members of the class of '63 who showed up here today, and also express my thanks to all of you who wish you had been members of the class of '63.
Don't send them away yet. I ain't done talking. Mark Ross was my cousin, in addition to being my barber. Yeah. Let me end with a Christmas story on Columbia Heights, in an ethnic family like mine. We had Christmas on Christmas Eve. The day before, we would barbecue pigs in the backyard, which was a tradition from the Middle European countries. We had two pigs we would cook side by side. One was for the Ross family, one was for us. But anyway, at Christmas Eve at my house, everybody was there, and pretty soon there'd be somebody knocking on the front door. And here was a group of guys with musical instruments, guys like Nicky Pribbage back there, his dad, Jock, and a few other boys came knocking on the doors, and they would come into the house and they would play ethnic music. It was like bluegrass music in a different language, is basically what it was. So these guys would go to all the different houses that of the people. They would play some songs, take a drink of Slivovitz, a couple drinks of Slivovitz. We would put dollar bills, money into the instruments, and the strings of the instruments, and they would go off into the night and play at another house. Wonderful tradition. So that's all I got.
First of all, thank you so much for your wonderful memories, and I agree, thank you for coming, all of you. Thank you all so much for coming. Come back next month. You're going to stick around.